Hello, Lisa here. Welcome back to my channel and welcome back to Self-Worth Saturday. It has been a hot minute since I have done one of these because I was away at a conference and other things were going on in my life, but I am really excited to be back and to bring you this week's topic, which is all about trusting other people. So if this is something you struggle with, stay tuned. I always say that like there's going to be an intro reel, but then there's no intro reel because I still haven't figured out how to make one of those. Side note, if you know how to make a really cool intro reel and feel like lending me some of your advice, information, knowledge, or expertise, please hit me up on Glide, Messenger, Facebook, or email because I could use some help in that area. Moving along though. So in Self-Worth Saturday, if you are new here, just know that each week when I do this series, I will give you my thoughts and experiences about a particular topic. Keep in mind that I am not a mental health professional or a professional of any kind outside of, administrative expertise. So I speak to you from my own personal experience. And please just be mindful of your own needs, your own abilities to take in information like this. Trigger warning all over this video series in general because we often end up talking about some pretty touchy topics. So if this is something you're not in a really great space for, just skip this video. It's all good. My feelings won't be hurt, and I really think it's important to be responsible for your self-care in that way. But I will always share with you from my own personal experience the lessons I've learned or am currently learning and how that's going, and maybe share some practical advice or tips or something that you can actually apply in your life to help in this particular area. I'll always give you a few journal prompts so that you can do some exploring on your own if that's something you feel comfortable doing. And I will always pull a oracle card at the end, as well as give us a little bit of a challenge as a group, something that we can each individually try to stretch ourselves in the area of growth that the weekly topic is about. So our list of topics is decent for now, but I would love more. So if you have an idea for a topic you want me to cover in Self-Worth Saturday, please hit me up by email at tarotwithlisa@gmail.com, or you can send me a Facebook message, leave a comment down below, or rather than not, easier if it's not in the live chat because it's easier to find it if it's in a comment in the bottom of the video, which you will be able to leave once the video has finished premiering, or anywhere else you know how to get a hold of me. Instagram, etc. All good. So I would love some more topic ideas because it's really great to talk about stuff that I know resonates with you guys too. Don't forget to like this video if you are enjoying this series, or if you're new here and you know you're going to be enjoying this series. I always appreciate the thumbs. And don't forget to subscribe if you're new here and want to see more videos like this. And there's also a little bell if you want to be notified. Sometimes it works even, which is amazing. So last time I challenged us, or last time we had a topic, I challenged us to notice when our inner critic was speaking up and to see if we could just pull ourselves back a little bit from that voice, be more of the witness, watch what was happening with our inner critic in our mind, and maybe see if we could get our inner critic out of the driver's seat and at least into the passenger seat. If you're really successful, shove it in the trunk. I'm curious to hear how you guys did about that last week. So if you're in the chat with me right now, or you're watching this on replay and want to comment, I would love to hear how it went for you. For me, I've been a bit of a mess the last couple weeks, to be honest. Dealing with grief, also have a lot going on. I got to go to a really amazing tarot conference, but sometimes distracting myself from what I'm processing is great in the moment, but it still kind of all is waiting for me when I get home. So I've definitely been dealing still with some emotions that feel a little more all over the place. So my inner critic tends to pop up and go, again, who do you think you are? Why are you, even leading conversations or topics about this stuff? And all I have to say to that, and what I kind of reminded my inner critic was, hey, we're all somewhere along this journey. I'm not pretending to be something I'm not. And I hope you guys all know that I'm not pretending to be finished or evolved or the expert on any of this stuff. I'm just another person who is sort of making her way along the journey to self-worth, and I want to share a little of what I've learned along the way, but I in no way have this all sorted out and am perfect in anything. And I think it's really important to be vulnerable. So my inner critic was pretty noisy as my emotions got out of whack, or I found myself behaving in ways I don't like to with Peggy or with other people in my life. So it was a little bit noisy. I don't know that I did a great job of pulling away from it, but at least I was able to notice when it was happening. So I'd be curious how you guys did with your inner critic. But let's talk about this week's topic, which is about trusting other people. And it's hilarious. Not it's kind of funny, not funny, but I find that when I am preparing to talk about the weekly topic, I usually, maybe it's because I'm more aware of it, but I usually notice I have some big like screw up in the exact area that we're going to be talking about every single week, which is funny, not funny, right? Ask Peggy, definitely not funny. But I found myself struggling with trust this week, and particularly the latter half of this week, like yesterday specifically, at the time I'm filming this. But trusting other people is tough, and not trusting other people can show up in a whole lot of ways. To begin with, trust is a tricky concept, and sometimes a lot of us have a tendency to think of trust as a black or white, on or off quality. We either trust you or you don't. You're either worthy of trust or you're not. But the reality is that trust is kind of a spectrum, and people fall in different places on that spectrum, often for good reason, and sometimes for not good reason. So we have to kind of judge for ourselves where somebody should be on that spectrum, and then decide what we want to do to improve the way that we're working with that person or dealing with that person. If you have somebody in your life that you know you should trust, that has earned your trust, that deserves your trust, and you're still struggling to trust them, that's the kind of thing that we're going to be mostly focusing on during today's video and in our live chat. So trust is a tricky concept, definitely wanted to cover that. It's also not something I think should just be handed out willy-nilly. I mean, there's a reason that we protect ourselves, and some of us have been through experiences that have taught us that self-protection is not only a good idea, it's mandatory for survival. And I think that that's important and not to be discredited in any way. I also think that when we can't really trust others, though, it can be this enormous barrier to having quality relationships. When we're not able to extend our trust to other people, particularly the people that deserve it the most, we actually prevent ourselves from really enjoying the depths of those relationships, and we can actually find it difficult to maintain any relationships, personal, professional, casual, or deep. Because if we're just never trusting anybody, and the other person senses that, they're not sticking around, because that doesn't feel good. It just doesn't feel good to not be trusted, especially when you know that you have no reason to not be trusted, if that makes any sense. So whether it's an issue that you've had to deal with because you've noticed your relationships struggle, if you're the kind of person that finds yourself needing or feeling the need to monitor your partner's activities to a level that's unhealthy, or at all, or you're doing this with your children or your friends, or you're feeling hypervigilant, these are kinds of things that I feel I've experienced as negative expressions of not being able to trust. So what does not trusting people look like? If you're not able to trust people very well, you might find that you slip into controlling and manipulative behavior. This is my big one, and you guys have heard me talk about this before. My go-to default setting is to be controlling and manipulative. It's not something that I like about myself or that I want to be, so it's something I try to consciously work on, but especially when I'm not at my best and I'm not feeling like I can trust others, this shows up in a big bad way. The thing is, when we don't trust others, we're not able to relinquish control or power to other people because we don't trust them to use that power wisely. I feel like what happens is that we end up strategizing and unconsciously manipulating situations to guarantee reliable results. We want to know what the outcome is going to be of any situation, of any conversation, of any conflict. And so we think through all the avenues that we could take to get to our desired end point. And when we do that, we actually don't factor in the other person, their feelings, or what they want or need. That's where it becomes controlling and manipulative. We're not leaving ourselves open to having the kind of conversation that can actually be really and truly honest or authentic because we're too busy trying to control the way that conversation is going to go. So if you find yourself regularly slipping into controlling and manipulative behaviors, intended or not, you might have difficulty trusting people. Another thing that shows up when you have difficulty trusting is discomfort with spontaneity. So, have you ever been told that you're really difficult to surprise? Yeah. Or that you just seem like you're addicted or attached to your plan or a script or a rule set? You might have difficulty dealing with spontaneity because you can't predict that outcome. And if you don't trust the person that you're being spontaneous with for things to come out okay, you're not going to be comfortable with spontaneity. That just kind of makes sense. Sometimes the reason that you're not easy to surprise, as that example, to just kind of circle back to that, It's because you're so busy managing and controlling your environment that you've left no space for anybody to surprise you. They're always like looking, if you're always looking to somebody's motives, if you're always trying to figure out what's going on beneath the surface, if you have that sort of general distrust, it shows up. And you're difficult to surprise. I love surprises, but I'm very difficult to surprise for all of those reasons. And it's something that I'm consciously working on because I love surprises. And I love when I allow myself to be spontaneous. I love those experiences. They're some of my favorite. But it takes work for me to actually let go enough to allow those things to unfold. Another thing that might come up is you might find that you're very physically and emotionally tense, maybe all the time. The reality is that being vigilant all the time, which is caused by a lack of trust in others, as well as there's other causes. But if you have a lack of trust in others, you're more likely to be vigilant a lot. And when you're vigilant a lot, you're holding a lot of physical and emotional tension while you're in that trying to protect yourself, that guarded place. It's just something that's hard to avoid when you're in a place where you're just not trusting other people. And you might find that you have difficulty maintaining friendships and relationships. When we don't trust others, it's really, really hard to maintain healthy relationships. Because again, as I mentioned in the beginning, if you've got a really, really good friend, but you're constantly doubting their motives or thinking they're up to no good, that's going to show in the way that you communicate with them. And that lack of trust will degrade your relationship with that person. I've seen it happen in my own life time and time again. And at a certain point, you have to take some risks if you want to see the relationship progress. And if you're not in a place to take risks, that's completely okay. Some of us aren't. Just know that if this is something you want to work on and you're with somebody who you feel is deserving of that trust, it's worth working on. Let's talk about some reasons why we struggle with this. The first is the most obvious. Sorry, I have like an itch spot right there. The first is the most obvious. We have had untrustworthy people in our lives. And the reality is most of us have. Some of us have had a healthier dose of that, or not healthier, bigger dose of that than others. And so it's valid. We don't trust because we've been taught not to trust. This is human reaction. This is human behavior. If every partner you ever had cheated on you, you're going to expect every partner you ever have to cheat on you until you learn otherwise. The problem comes in is that if every partner you've ever had has cheated on you, and this is the example I'm using because this was my personal experience, if every partner you've ever had has cheated on you, then when you finally have a partner who doesn't cheat on you, it can take a while before you actually recognize that that's true, integrate that information, and truly believe it. And that's a part of, I think, what leads us to not be able to trust is our past experiences. And it's not always about partners. Sometimes it's about people who were in charge of us, who had care of us as their primary job, who did a poor job. So we don't trust people to take care of us or to look after our best interests. The other thing that can happen is we might have spent time in unpredictable or abusive environments. This can be with a parent, a caregiver, or a partner. This is again me speaking from my me place, but if you've lived in a lot of unpredictable, chaotic, painful, abusive environments, you're going to mistrust a lot of things and a lot of people. You're going to look for predictable, safe zones that you can be in, that you can feel safe in. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's just important to be aware that this is going to be your default setting. And if you want to grow and expand, you'll have to look at that and see how much of a role that's currently playing in your life and how much of it is kind of old ghosts and past stuff. Finally, or no, not finally, there's a few more. We haven't learned to cope with disappointment or failure. Sometimes a lack of trust is because we haven't quite managed to sort out how to absorb and integrate when experiences don't go or when things don't go the way that we want them to. Lack of trust means we don't trust that if things go badly, that we'll be okay, or if things go badly, our relationship will be okay, or if things go badly, that XYZ will be okay. If you know how to handle disappointment, or if you're comfortable with regrouping when things go badly, it's easier to trust because you know that if things go kind of funny or awry, you'll be all right. But if you really have a difficulty coping with failures, letdowns, and disappointment, you might find it really difficult to trust. Black and white thinking. This is another one that is big for me. You might think of trust of something that is either, as I mentioned in the beginning, deserved or not, if somebody is worthy of it or not. We don't often think of those in-between places. Everybody's human. Even the person that is the most trustworthy is going to let you down sometime. And if you see black or trust as black or white, if you see it as on or off, then the first time a friend or a loved one disappoints you, they're going to go into the box labeled untrustworthy, and it's going to be really hard to pull them out and put them back in the trustworthy box. If you can start to view trust as a spectrum, it will change that a little bit. But a lot of us come from that mentality of black and white thinking. You either deserve the trust or you don't. And we're not leaving a lot of leeway there for humanity and human error and mistakes and miscommunications. We may not trust ourselves. The reality is that a lot of stuff that we project outward, a lot of stuff that bothers us about other people are reflected things that we don't like about ourselves. I don't think that's always true, and I'm not saying that that is unilaterally the way that it is, but at least for me, I find that often self-trust and trusting of others are permanently linked. The more that I trust myself, the easier it is for me to trust somebody else. If I trust myself to communicate well, I'm going to be less mistrustful of other people when they communicate. It's just this weird thing that I don't fully know how to explain, but it seems to be the case. It may not be the case for you. Definitely the case for me. So, let's look at how we can trust. I just knocked the camera, I'm sorry. Let's look at how we can trust a little bit more. First, we can work on self-trust. We covered that a couple weeks ago, so I will link that video in the cards so you can check that out on your own time. But definitely working on self-trust will put you in a stronger place to be able to start to extend that trust outside of yourself as well. We can be trustworthy. The reality is that the more trustworthy you are, the easier it is for you to see trustworthiness in others. If you are being open and honest with the people in your life, you're more likely to believe that they can be open and honest back, and you're also more likely to encourage them to be open and honest back. It's really difficult to be vulnerable with somebody who isn't being vulnerable with you. This came up actually with my sister a while ago, actually, and hopefully she'll be okay with me mentioning this. It's really a mild example, but it's one of those things where she noticed, I didn't notice. We were doing some tarot stuff back and forth, and we were often looking at cards, like pulling cards for her and talking about those cards as they related to her. And at one point she said, I just noticed that you don't share the readings for yourself. And there was a certain amount of guardedness that had been happening that I wasn't even aware of. And so since then I've made more of an effort to also be vulnerable as well, which is funny because I work on vulnerability all the time, but it was just one of those blind spots. I hadn't recognized I wasn't being as vulnerable back. And at a certain point that's going to make the other person feel guarded. It's like if I am pouring my heart out and you're not saying anything, I'm going to start to feel uncomfortable and it's going to be harder to trust and to open up. So I think it's worth saying that if you want to trust other people, you need to embody more trustworthiness yourself. Not self-blaming is an excellent way to start to learn how to trust other people. If you're spending all of your time self-flagellating, that's not going to help. The reality is that learning to trust is about practice. It's not about perfection. It's just like everything else we cover in this series. Anything related to building up your personal sense of self-worth, all of that relates back to one little baby step at a time. Perfect example, I had a major struggle with trust yesterday, and with somebody that I have had in my life who's been trustworthy for 12 plus years. Like, it's gonna come up. So not self-blaming and not wallowing and not self-flagellating makes a big difference. If you spend all of your time beating yourself up, you're not going to make any progress. And this is something that's going to come up again and again and again. And I don't mind repeating it because some of the repeated messages I've heard have been the most helpful. I think it's important to notice that you try to notice when you're trying to control outcomes. This is a big one. If you, let's see if I can think of a good example. Let's say you want to talk to your boss about not feeling valued at work. And so you plot out precisely what you're going to say, and then you plot out what you'll say if it doesn't go well, and you'll plot out what you'll say if they respond in this way. And so you're going to try to control the outcome. But you're not actually giving your boss any credit for just when you simply say, I'm not feeling valued at work, without explaining, without laying out a case, just saying it. You're not even finding out if your boss is trustworthy enough to respond to just that piece of information. And that's kind of a small, it's like the first example that popped in my head. In relationships, for example, well, I'll use the example from the other day. See if I can think of one. I kind of spaced out on what I was going to say. Or I chickened out. I'm not sure which. But Peggy and I will have these moments come up. I'm trying to think of something more generic, so it's not quite so ouchy and specific. But we'll have things come up where I'll ask a question, and before I wait for an answer, I lay out my case. Like, I'm like, can we do blah? And here's why this is important to me, and here's why I think this is a good idea. And by the time I'm done, I'm almost guaranteed that if she says she doesn't want to do blah, that she's going to feel like a jerk, because I've laid out so much stuff that she now needs to overcome or address, that she's kind of trapped, and I haven't given her any opportunity to be a grown-up and actually make a decision without all of this extra stuff. I've tried to manipulate the outcome, whether I meant to or not, by giving enough of a case or making enough of a case that she certainly will see it my way. And that's not a trusting behavior. A trusting behavior is, hey, can we do blah? Wait and see what she says. See if there's even a need to state a case. Maybe there won't be. And if there is, then start to, go back and forth with that kind of stuff. But it doesn't have to be controlled from the beginning. Because when we're trying to control the outcome, we're not actually leaving any space for the other person to even be trustworthy. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Let me know in the chat. Hopefully I'm not just speaking gobbledygook here. Focus on what can go right instead of only focusing on what could go wrong. This kind of ties into the last one. But the reality is, if you go into a situation thinking, what if it goes well? You're more likely to think about the opportunity you may give up if you don't act in a trusting way, if you don't take that risk, if you don't open yourself up. If you're having a struggle with trust, consider what would go well in the situations that come up that challenge that trust. Maybe there's not enough that would go well to outweigh what would go badly, and it's in your best interest to be mistrustful. That's valid. But if you think it through, you're going to make a choice from a heart-centered and thought-out place, and not a reactive place or just a self-vigilant place. And finally, again, practice, not perfection. I have a few journal prompts for you, and I'm going to pull out an oracle deck. Actually, I'm going to pull out Healers of the Earth because it's next to me and I loves it. So let's look at some journal prompts first. So if you have a pen and paper handy, that is awesome. Here they are. First, think of someone in your life who you would like to trust more. How have they earned your mistrust? And how have they earned your trust? And just explore that. Number 2, think of a time in your life when you tried to control the outcome of a situation or a conversation. How did it end up going? Did it go according to plan, or did it veer off course? Either way, how did you feel about the experience? And 3, imagine what totally trusting someone in your life, who deserves it, might look different from how your relationship with that person looks now. What would be different if you did trust that person entirely? I dropped a card. I dropped a card. Card down. Card down. Head down, too, apparently. There we go. Okay, I'm going to shuffle while I give us our challenge. So I'm going to make sure it's on my screen here. So I've got the Healers of the Earth Oracle by Mandy Peterson here. Mystic Mandy on Instagram if you want to follow her there. So this week's challenge is going to be to pay special attention to any controlling or mistrustful behavior on your part with people who you believe do deserve your trust. It doesn't have to be with every Joe Schmo on the street, and should not be. Mistrusting those people, that's not always a bad thing. So notice when these behaviors crop up. If you catch yourself at it, see what happens if you consciously release control in that conversation or situation, and make note of how doing that makes you feel. So essentially, I'm kind of asking us to pull back if we notice this crop up, pull back, try to move into the situation with trust, and just see what happens. All right, let's see what we got. I don't have the guidebook, so I'm not going to be reading a message. I'm just going to be hitting you with some intuitive info, knowledge, information. All right, so I'm going to consciously cut the deck. And we have got dashing through the snow, minor setbacks, delays, and what's the other word? Roadblocks. The image, the feeling I get from this is sort of consciously, is that what it says even? No, it doesn't. Okay. It's sort of consciously breaking through the roadblock of our personal comfort zone, our personal safe place. And I'm not saying that that's always appropriate. Again, use your discernment here. I trust you guys to know what you are ready for and what is comfortable for you. But the image I get in my head by seeing this like sort of winged stallion just dashing through the snow, as it says on the title, the feeling I get from this is this idea of just what happens when you just let loose a little bit. When you allow, especially with people you're pretty sure you can trust in this situation, when you allow yourself to move from the heart, when you allow yourself to open up to some vulnerability and open up to some risk and open up to some trust. What happens if you just go with the flow? So play with this, see what comes up for you this week. And as always, I hope that anything that I share with you on my YouTube channel serves your highest good. Until next time, you guys, and hopefully you'll be hanging out after for the live chat. I will see you later. Bye.